Hi, my peeps. How's it going? Um, Hopefully this video goes pretty smoothly. I just recorded an entire video earlier today on like a PSA for Latinos regarding cancer and university research, and I didn't turn on my microphone. Um, Thankfully, I think the video still came out decent. Uh, and you can't really hear the AC in the background, so I hope this video runs kind of smoothly. What is this video about? This video is inspired by the recent CardiB trial. Um, and I just decided to like talk a little bit about it because I find it really interesting. I find the case is super relevant for a lot of reasons, not just because she's a celebrity and we all love Cardi B, um, but because I think, this is an example of a bigger problem that's plaguing the Latino community. And so this video is a PSA for Latina women on the revenge porn epidemic. Here's what I think Latinos and Latinas need to hear. I did actually make myself a little bit of a script for this one because I didn't want to let my nerves and my anxiety get in the way with what I really want to say and make sure that I communicate and convey in this video. So, without much ado, I am going to get started. So, I had actually finished an assignment a while back related to this. I do a lot of research and kind of like explore certain theoretical fields quite a lot for my work, especially for my PhD work, or graduate work. So I tend to focus a lot on feminist studies, psychoanalysis, sometimes the bridge of the two, like feminist psychoanalysis, um, along with film and media studies and literature, obviously, because I'm an English major and a comparative literature major. So this is related to a little bit of like work that I did in the field a while back. Um, and I actually lost some of my original work, but I literally rewrote a lot of this just from scratch and off the top of my head recently. Um, my original response to like this situation really got started when I was reading Gloria Anzaldua's Borderlands and her like archival kind of like exploration of the Latino community or the Chicano community. And so my response was really inspired based, from that book. And I wrote a really long assignment, which I couldn't cut down into like 30 pages. It ended up being like much, much longer than that. And at some point in the future, I hope to maybe develop a script out of that assignment, hopefully like in a year, year and a half. You never know. And I hope that maybe at some point I might wrangle some of my friends in the film industry into working on it with me. No, we'll see if that happens. And yeah, the revenge porn epidemic. What does that have to do with this, right? Like it seems like a really different case, in that like Cardi B's case is not related to this at all. It was just like a money grab that a security officer was like trying to make frivolous accusations. But I think this is like an related to what I would call the revenge porn epidemic. And this issue is becoming increasingly relevant to Latina women, especially young BIPOC women. Um, this will hopefully include some part of my future dissertation work, which covers the revenge porn epidemic, which is brewing in culture right now. And, back in the feminist circles around the 60s and around the gay panic of the 80s, the issue of pornography, like, became a huge point of discussion. Some of the questions around pornography were, is it anti-feminist? Is it feminist? How does it affect women? Is it liberating for women? There's so much to say about it. Um, this is becoming a critical subject more and more because, technology, especially cameras, are now at the fingertips of just about anyone, and anyone can record almost anything they want, right? I've made a quick Instagram video in which I covered a little bit about this because I do have some legal background, and I really enjoy like doing interdisciplinary work that includes some of the legal aspects of these type of like social issues. Um, yes, so people are allowed to record in public. You are allowed to record in public spaces. However, we do have personal protections around uh these types of issues when we're being recorded without consent, without proper consent, without proper written consent. Um, and you can't always assume consent, right? Not there isn't always like the protection of implied consent in certain situations. And I would recommend people, and I'm sure a lot of attorneys would recommend people, um, to not assume that consent is present because you're recording in a public space or public location. We are entitled to like protections under the law. A lot of the times it can fall under like criminal law or civil law. And, we're allowed to call the police. We can file charges for harassment, for blackmail or extortion, any related um like offense that fits basically the situation. Um, Not only that, but legally we also have the right to request that our faces be blurred and that material be removed from online spaces if it has been posted online. Um, and that's just to give you a little bit of a summary on what I talked about on Instagram. And I want to continue with that discussion here. So, this is really becoming something that we see more and more online, especially because, like the Cardi B case, to give you a summary of that, she basically was going to a medical appointment and, a fan who happened to be a security guard started recording her and like tried to provoke her into an argument. Um, Cardi B says that she took out her phone, the security guard took out her phone and like started recording her. And, you know, a lot of people assume that because she's a celebrity or because she's a famous person, that it's okay to do that. However, uh, in certain spaces, you really need to be careful because when we're going to the medical doctor, there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. When we're going to certain governmental appointments, there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. There is a reasonable expectation of confidentiality. And I'm not talking just about medical doctors. I'm also talking about like therapy appointments, any like related kind of appointment. Um, and so that's something to keep in mind. And the reason why, Cardi B ended up winning the argument and ended up winning like the case in her favor. So, yeah, it doesn't have like to somebody who's just witnessing this trial and like following, it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with like revenge porn or have anything to do with being like being allowed to record in public. But based off of a lot of the research that I've done, based off of a lot of the conversations I've had with women, based off on a lot of the surveys I've done online, uh, in social media spaces, in pornography spaces. This is an issue that is an extension of like the pornography debate that feminists were having back in the 60s, back in the 80s. And how is this an extension of that? The primary victims that are put in these positions are disproportionately female and disproportionately um BIPOC women. So a lot of times what happens is that this is just an extension of boundary violations that men, primarily men, tend to carry out against women. And this is a form of gendered and sexual based violence, community violence, right? Um, and based off of a lot of the research that I've done, porn sites are filled with material that was supposedly submitted with consent by the like image owner, but a good chunk of them don't were not actually submitted with proper legal consent of the individuals it features, i.e., the women, or sometimes the men that are featured in compromising positions, compromising sexual positions in the images, in the videos. And something that, is an extension of this CardiB issue, like that went to trial, is the first thing that I want to highlight is that just because someone gives you like images or videos, it doesn't give that person who has the material the permission to unilaterally do whatever they want with it. They cannot unilaterally release those images onto a public forum, much less make a profit out of them. And that's just like the basic like surface issue on this sort of like revenge porn topic. Um, Cardi B's case was a very public case involving, celebrities being used by non-famous people to get some attention and to try to like gain some easy money, like get some easy monies, uh, like open up a frivolous claim, which by the way, I cannot even believe that it went through to trial because uh yes, it might have been a PR move on Cardi B's like lawyer and team's side that they chose to blow it up on purpose because they were angry that this is even going to that point. And we know Cardi, she's like, girl, she's drama. And if she's gonna go there, occur, let's go there. Do you know what I mean? So the reason why I'm saying is because in the legal world, generally, like this would have gone through like a review process and they could have settled and had a judge like privately uh make a call on this, but they chose to take it all the way through trial and like have a jury and do the jury thing and the whole shebang. And but the ridiculousness of it is that it shouldn't have even gotten this far. Like it could have just been thrown out by a judge right from the beginning. In any case, it turned out the way that everyone expected it would turn out. Um, and there's something that I want to highlight about this is that first of all, even when someone is famous, like we don't have any like right to harass anyone. Just because they're celebrities, it doesn't mean that they're any less human. Harassment is harassment. It's even if they're famous, the crime still applies, under the law, the way it's stated. So be very careful about your interaction with these individuals because, um, like just because they're celebrities, it doesn't mean that the law changes for you when you're interacting with them. And remember, like you are not allowed to use their images without proper consent. A lot of them, because there's so many people that have access to their pictures, because they're so public, a lot of their images just get used, their names get used, like the stories that we know about them get used. However, keep in mind that this is why they retain entertainment attorneys. Like they make money off of their image, off of their work, off of their songs. So if it like becomes an issue where you're impersonating them when and I refer back to the Scarlett Johansson case recently where she sued because they were using her voice. If it's something that is part of their person and 100% you can recognize that that's them, and you're using their brand, their image without proper legal consent, and they make money out of that, you are 100% putting yourself in the line of fire for a suit or a countersuit of some kind. So be really careful because even though they're celebrities, these people make money off of their image and their voice and their music. So, keep in mind this is something that entertainment attorneys live for, and those guys are vampires. As soon as they smell the blood, they will show up. Personally, I have experienced this kind of online cyber abuse several times already. And like so many other women, I've literally had enough. So this issue is not limited to celebrities. And this is why I decided to make this video. There are so many women that have complained, I was giving him a blowjob and he started recording me. I didn't even realize that he snuck in hidden camera in the teddy bear, and that's the teddy bear he gave me, and we put it on the bed and it recorded everything. um so many ways that people, particularly men, have gotten away with like catching porn or pornography material that was not consensual, but because they have it in their possession, they got away with, like recording it and keeping it. Yes, there are women that actively take pictures, actively like give them to their partners. We're not here to judge because in a relationship, there's supposed to be trust. If that person proves themselves to be untrustworthy, so be it, right? But that those are different ways that starts to become an issue. And honestly, this kind of like online cyber abuse is not limited to sexually like explicit footage, videos, images. It really extends from this type of case with Cardi B to like online bullying on social media that is not sexually related, to like cyber stalking. And it is an incredibly huge problem. It's becoming a bigger and bigger problem as time goes on. And I make this video because there's so many young women out there dating and trying to like figure out how to navigate all of this. And, they don't really realize that it's becoming an increasingly common issue. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do. Oftentimes, if they're experiencing this and they, because of like cultural pressures, they feel a lot of shame, or they don't know who to talk to about it. They may end up suffering in silence from like blackmail or extortion or whatever it is. So, for the young women out there that are trying to figure out how to navigate the dating world and relational world and trying to figure out some answers on how to deal with this, you know, hopefully this video will highlight like a little bit of what's actually going on in with this entire like revenge porn issue. Like I mentioned, I myself have been blackmailed, I think, no less than 3 times, twice by relatives. They've tried to actually blackmail um a relative of mine, once by someone I dated, twice by an extended relative, with supposedly controversial images of me. And I was also actually recorded during an assault at a UC campus recently, not too long ago. And the police had to get involved, and there was an entire issue. Thankfully, bruises heal. Um, and what I can say about that is number one, men and women cannot use the camera as a shield. It's just illogical. You may think that recording a person's going to stop them from doing something, but in reality, you're actually already showing that you're escalating. You're willing to escalate a situation into a criminal level because that kind of like recording someone is can be construed that as like harassment, intent to use the footage for blackmail or extortion purposes. And you can read intent based off of the circumstance that you're in. And if the intent is to humiliate, to embarrass, to like publicly shame someone, then you're already putting yourself in the line of fire if you're trying to use your phone and your camera as a shield. So do not do that, because you're literally just showing that you're willing to escalate an argument. And the other person is logically going to request that you turn that off and you stop recording, and you need to comply. You really should comply. If your life is in danger and you feel like you're in danger, walk away, right? Walk away, run away, stop interacting, stop talking, find an exit. Um, because the camera and recording the person without actually taking steps to like stop a negative interaction, but actually trying to like remove yourself from the environment, and you continue to record someone when they're asking you not to record, that is a big red flag. And I've heard of women that have gone through this quite a lot as a form of abuse. I've also heard of women that think that this is somehow going to protect them from other women who are trying to like jump them or beat them, or from like abusive husbands or boyfriends. Don't do it. It's just not uh unless you are in your own home in the privacy of your own room. You should not be recording somebody when there is an implied when there's an implied, like when the expectation, there's a reasonable expectation to privacy. Okay, so if there's a reasonable expectation to privacy, emphasis on the reasonable, then do not record, right? And this is becoming an increasingly persistent issue that I've noticed police officers and police departments cannot really get a handle on. They don't know how to deal with these issues. Um, you know, so many police officers are undertrained on how to deal with this, and they really their responses just lag. They really, really just lag. They It's incredibly frustrating for victims that have experienced this not once, not twice, but quite a few times already, in different forms, in different ways. And to have these people like not really know how to deal with these situations, and to feel like the victim is the one basically like being the one that has to like prove their innocence, is a ridiculous thing that already tells you this is a huge abuse issue. When the onus is on the victim to prove they are innocent of something, that this society's priorities are all fucked up. And pardon my French, but I will go there. Um, they just don't know what to do about it. The police departments do not know what to do about it. And a lot of times these issues get swept under the rug. They fall through the cracks. The police report never gets made, never shows up, never gets written, or, like we call it a day. They call it like a mutual altercation. A lot of times these police officers don't know that the evidence needs to be collected, i.e., the phone needs to be confiscated, right? The phones need to be confiscated. The material cannot just be deleted. It needs to be completely erased from the phone, meaning it needs to also be deleted from the trash can, meaning that that person also needs, like, the officers need to take that person's personal information and social media information, because if that video finds its way online, guess what? There's a record of it. Those police officers need to do the police report. They need to write it up, because guess what? At least there's a record of it. And we just cannot compromise on this, right? This is a new kind of modern terrorism that women have to live with. And unfortunately, so many of us are like suffering from very similar kinds of abuse silently, and we just don't know what to do about it. On top of that, unfortunately, certain kinds of abuse in the Latino community get normalized way too frequently. We just say like boys will be boys, así es como son las cosas, así son los hombres. Enough. Like we've had enough of that. A lot of times when these individuals have these images, if they get broken up with for completely reasonable, like issues that the man has, primarily men, um, a lot of times this becomes porn that gets released out of revenge. Because they don't want to be, they're angry because they didn't want the girl to break up with them, because they're angry, and just resentful. That's why we call it revenge porn. It's usually most of the time the women that have their images released did not actually give consent for these images to be released publicly. A lot of the times, it's been discovered that this is something an individual has a history with, i.e., they've blackmailed other partners before, and or they are working with other like criminal, uh, like pretty much like in involved in other criminal enterprises in which they use these images as blackmail extortion material. So, and this is a huge red flag, right? Because you can tie this to like uh cases of like sexual assault or cases of human trafficking. And you really want to be careful, because often there is a hidden correlation between the two. Um, a lot of the times women have reported that they were originally blackmailed, or the person tried to extort them for money or some kind of like benefit. Um, it's not going to happen. Don't let it happen. The people that have these images will only uh the likelihood that they're gonna stop and not put these images online is really slim. Um, putting up the images online will only further incriminate the person who committed the crime, because, let's be honest, most of us are able to identify where it came from and who posted it. I think most women, I mean, I know as Latinas, like we can like probably know as soon as we look at an image who it was that released it with like a 99.9% accuracy. We can sniff this shit out pretty fast. Um, so let's be honest, we probably know if we see it online who posted it, where it came from, and we can identify the people responsible or the person responsible. On top of this kind of like revenge porn abuse, we still have to deal with other like gendered-based violence and bullying. Like I said, there's so much of it going on social media, on TikTok, especially TikTok. You guys all know how I really hate TikTok. It's one of the worst platforms out there, and I think it does a worse job than some porn sites in protecting women from sexual and gender-based violence that I have ever seen in my life. And I was raised in the technological evolution. Um, it's really sad to know that even a lot of porn sites are really getting with the program and starting to remove footage that's reported as potentially being posted without proper consent of usually the women in the images or videos. But TikTok right now is like super behind. And I mean, if the platform does not improve in the next couple years, I predict it will 100% go bankrupt because of this, or it's going to get sued somehow. And I'm just waiting for the ACLU to jump on it because it's a huge, huge issue. It's making a lot of women targets and susceptible to violence that migrates from an online space to an actual physical space when they don't like stop this and within like a prompt reasonable amount of time. um and like I said, I think a lot of porn sites are actually really getting on board with protecting individuals and women and working with different like organizations that stop like online revenge porn spreading. I know that I've read some of like FetLife's policies where I've seen a lot of material and I've read through a lot of like different posts and for research. And they generally will be they generally welcome reports about material that should not be online. Um, and this is sadly because they're starting to realize it's becoming a huge, huge problem. So, we're jumping from the Cardi B situation and the correlation between what's happened to her in this entire case with like this broader revenge porn issue is like it's really aligned. It's in the same realm of like why feminism exists in the first place, right? So, what can you do? So, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer because yes, I do have a paralegal certificate from UCLA. Yes, I worked in law for a while. Yes, I do some research that's relevant on occasion, and I work a lot with like advocacy, like legal related theories and community theories that involve like pertinent legal issues, et cetera, et cetera. But I do want to give the disclaimer that I am not an attorney. And this disclaimer I give to everyone, by the way. And most attorneys will also give like a separate disclaimer. I am not an attorney, so I am not able to give legal advice. However, if it's common sense advice, if it is reasonable advice, and my legal experience like supports my advice and I am able to like guide individuals. At the same time, I am required to say that if you have any further questions, if you have a particular case that you need advice on, go get yourself the opinion of an actual attorney and maybe even a secondary opinion, by a different attorney. And if you really want to like do your homework, get yourself a consultation by a third attorney if necessary. The more the merrier, because no two attorneys might have the same opinion on a very similar issue or on the same case even. And that being said, paralegals do a lot of work around certain cases, so we tend to be exposed to a lot of the same issues. Um, in regards to how to work up a case, what we need in terms of evidence, and if we're immersed in a particular field, we might just end up knowing quite a lot about that field and the law involved in that field. Again, though, not an attorney. I am not legally able to give anyone legal advice, but I am just giving general advice on this issue. So, what can you do? Yeah, like before I even continue, consult an attorney if you can and if you want to, right? Um, Aside from that, if you see it, report it. Um, so this is tricky because sexuality and gender is so complicated and fraught, even in academic spaces where we like discuss these issues very openly. We spend sometimes quarters, semesters, years in courses talking about these issues. looking at them from different lenses. And, sexuality is like religion. You could be, completely identify yourself for a season as 100% straight and then realize, you know what, I'm not that straight. Maybe I'm bisexual. And it is what it is. It's not necessarily against human nature. Sexuality is a very fluid thing, and that's something that's just been proven over a really, really long period of time. And we've seen it since, like, I like to say the Roman ages because that's my point of reference. That the example that I always use is, like everybody was having affairs. They had their very straight heteronormative marriages, but everyone had, affairs on the side, and sometimes they were homosexual affairs. You name it. Like we've always seen it. We've seen transvestites, we've seen lesbians and gays, we've seen it all for a really, really long time in history. So um we talk about these issues quite a lot. Do not judge what you see because you don't know the full story. However, if it doesn't seem right to you and something seems off, report it. So if you see it, report it. You don't ever know. On top of that, I'm gonna be honest, prostitution has been the oldest profession in the world for women because we, aside from getting married, we had historically very limited ways of making money. Even marriage is a much nicer way and a much more graceful way of being a glorified prostitute, to be honest, right? Um, you know, yes, I know maybe I'm gonna get chewed on for that comment, but the truth is the truth, at least the way I see it and the way that I've learned to see it. So do not judge the material you see. The person could be 100%, heterosexual or 100% homosexual, but if they need to prostitute themselves in order to make a living and pay their bills, you are nobody to judge them. But if you see it, report it. Let the person that it features deal with the issue if they feel like it needs to be dealt with. Um, let them deal with the mix up, let them deal with the confusion, let them take, control over that situation and find ways of reporting it in a way that it like enables them to handle the matter. Um, if they posted the image, then so be it. If they don't, if they did, they don't have to explain it to anyone unless there are other extenuating circumstances that need to be explained that either crossed, ethical lines or criminal lines. That being said, remember that, each individual has a right to not self-incriminate. So if they present with like, they're presented with this footage and somebody reaches out, says, hey, like we had to report this because it featured so and so. And that person is like, we don't know what's going on in their life. And that person doesn't have to give or provide any information that they don't want to. At the same time, they also have a right not to self-incriminate if it may, border into the criminal realm. Report it to multiple agencies. It's okay. Like there are so many agencies that could potentially deal with this issue. If you see it on an international website, report it to the FBI, report it to the CIA, report it to the actual like website that it's on, report it to schools if it's associated with a student, report it to like social services if it's pertinent to a case or an issue that's, they might be handling. Report it to any agency that could potentially handle the matter. Even if it doesn't get investigated, at least there's a record of it somewhere, somehow, in some governmental agency has a record of it. If they decide they're not going to investigate further or the investigation doesn't lead to anything, at least it's out of your hands and you did your ethical duty to report it. Um, I say this because oftentimes if there are other criminal issues or there are other like uh yeah, pretty much criminal issues associated to, this kind of images, especially when people are getting blackmailed and extorted for high amounts of money by international thieves or national thieves that are crossing country or state lines. Um, the more agencies know, the better. Like I said, a lot of times there is, some connection between these kinds of images and human trafficking and other kinds of abuse that unfortunately plague society quite frequently. Um, where was I? Right. So make sure that you record it to multiple agencies. That way there is a record of the complaint somewhere. On top of that, if you report it to an agency, to a department, someone, somewhere, if somebody comes asking questions about it and you are in the hot water to figure out what to do, like you don't know what to do, at least you have, proof that you did the correct thing and you tried to help the person that is featured in these videos. The next thing, tell someone, let them know the truth, let them know what happened. Um, Also like tell the individual that you saw if possible. If it's not possible, just tell anybody, right? Tell somebody, hey, like this might be an issue. I don't know. What do you think? Because sometimes maybe if it's a friend of a friend, you don't know that friend very well. If you tell the friend of a friend, they might be able to say, yeah, this was an issue that the person had with an ex-partner. I know, I know a lot of people hate being the subject of like chisme and gossip, but part of feminism is doing the right thing for other women and making sure that we spread the word on these type of issues. I have been, unfortunately had to filter out so many friends because they just did not know how to warn the other women in their life that this man or this, teenager or whoever it was starting to have these kinds of issues. And we became the victim because we didn't talk about it. We didn't say, hey, watch out for this Harvey Weinstein bro. He's a big red flag. This is what he's done. Tell somebody, talk about it. Don't hide it because we're only causing this damage to like live simmering, hidden away from like public light, and it just continues to get worse and worse. Warn others about the crime and the person or people involved. Hey, listen, you can't claim ignorance as a defense. Like, ignorance of the law is not a proper defense. That's not legal advice. That's just me telling you, like, what's up, right? Don't act dumb. Don't act stupid. If you know if it sits wrong with you and it's morally wrong and it's ethically wrong, then it's probably legally wrong. It's probably a crime. Um, so, if somebody is telling you and warning you multiple times and you continue to ignore their warnings, you literally have zero excuse. And this also applies to so many other issues. This is why I said ignorance of the law is not a proper defense. Stupidity is not a proper defense. Unless you've been legally, you know, uh, disabled. It's not a defense. So warn others, set that boundary, let them know what the issue is, and then put some space. You don't ever want to put yourself in harm's way, like physically. So put some space between yourself and that individual or that group of individuals. And I say group of individuals because I have known and I have heard of a lot of individuals, specifically in religious circles, that gang up to do this to their congregation members or to other members involved in their community for the express purpose of blackmailing and extorting them for money and for large sums of money and for like coercing them to do things or favors for them. And unfortunately, we know that these are big enterprises because when they've tried to investigate them, surprisingly, somehow the footage, the material disappears. We know when we know that they just happen to have like a network of people that are good with computers, that are able to scrub some of this evidence and make it disappear or move the evidence or move like the drive somewhere else, right? So make sure you warn individuals, make sure that you let them know, set that boundary. Do not be that person. So, in other words, don't be that person that's like releasing material. Don't be that person that's showing the footage. Don't even show like if you're the woman and he sent you the dick pic, erase it, get rid of it. Don't even show it to anyone, right? Don't be that person because if we do it as women, you bet your bottom dollar the men are going to say, well, she did it to me. Like it must be okay if I show my cousin, my cousin's cousin, and my tío and my tío's tío and everybody else, every other male in my family. Don't do it. Do not give the like, do set the standard. You set the standard. Get rid of it, delete it, expunge it, erase it, hammer away at that computer, do whatever you got to do, but do not be that person. If you're a man and you're watching this, don't be that man. It is one of the signs that you are not a sexually evolved male that any woman would ever want to get involved with. So, for the sake of like not becoming part of the male loneliness epidemic, don't do it. Don't threaten anyone with a camera. Do not try to be sneaky. Do not try to blackmail or extort. Just don't do it. Do not pay the blackmailer or the blackmailers or the extortionists ever. Never negotiate with a terrorist. These people are terrorists. They're social terrorists. And just don't pay them. Don't waste your money. Even if you do have it, it's not worth it. You're only giving that person or those people more power over you. Um, Try your best to do it, report it, go the legal route as much as possible. Report it to social services if it involves anyone under 18. Um, Make sure that you just don't negotiate. Don't give them money, right? It does not guarantee that they will not post that footage, that video online anyways, right? It also doesn't guarantee that they didn't share it with others already. Be prepared to explain the situation. Um, yeah, be an adult. Even if you're a teenager and you're watching this, if you're a young adult woman, if you're an older woman and you're going through this somehow, be prepared to explain the situation, be mature about it. Surprisingly, based off of like the different statistics and research that I've like delved into, it happens to about 1 out of 3 women right now, which is about as much as like domestic violence. It's becoming an increasingly bigger problem, and there probably isn't a woman or two in your life that hasn't already encountered this issue somehow. So yeah, just be prepared to explain the situation, be prepared to deal with it as a mature adult. Um, and last thing I want to say is be brave. Like, may your tits live on online and prosper. Uh, it is what it is. Yay for the tits online. I'm sure they're beautiful. And just don't care. Don't give a fuck. Leave them online. If you see it and you can report it and make sure that it gets removed and you want it to get removed, you know, try your best to get it removed. But if it becomes impossible and it's still living on online, go titties. These kinds of people, primarily men, literally only want to do this to try to like abuse or coerce you and it's a power move. Okay. We all have body parts, private body parts. We all got it. Um, just remove that kind of power from these people by not giving a fuck. So yeah, so just be brave. And at the end of the day, the pornography, the images, the videos are not a problem. It's the people that post it, usually men. And yes, sometimes, but rarely women. Um, they use the pornography as a tool to abuse. And you need to have that very clear and understand that very, very clearly. And we still have a long ways to discuss as, you know, a feminist movement, new wave feminist movement, whatever you want to call it, as women, a society on how to deal with this and approach this. But this isn't really a woman's problem or a victim's problem. The pornography issue is also not a feminist problem, as with a lot of issues that primarily involve men as the perpetrators of abuse. It's a masculinity and a patriarchy problem. And we also need to find better ways as a society to hold these people accountable and responsible for the type of damage that they cause. This is an extremely stressful situation to put anybody in, especially young women, young teenage girls that are going through this unexpectedly, don't know how to handle this. And we need to find better ways of like dealing with this in society and just get real with the problem, you know? And I want to thank lastly Cardi B for being my starting example with this sort of like revenge porn video and my PSA for Latina women, young Latina BIPOC women. Thanks so much for watching this. Thanks so much for putting up with my yapping. And may the titties live long online. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I hope to see you next time in another video. Bye.